Welcome to my Career Book Club, where we explore real strategies for thriving in your career. My name is Julie Cullen, and in this podcast I get to indulge in two of my favourite pastimes. The first is reading books, and the second is sharing what I've learned. Each week I provide key learning points from some of my favourite career and personal development books, and share them in the context of real, lived experiences combined with practical coaching tips to help you apply what you've learned. A couple of things before we get into today's episode. Firstly, I'd like to thank you for tuning in to the podcast every week. It means the world to me as you're helping me to achieve a dream of mine, so thank you for that. And secondly, if you enjoy these episodes, please hit the subscribe button and follow us on whichever app you're currently listening. It helps to build the visibility of this podcast on the platforms. I also invite you to get in touch with me if there are any books that you would like to hear featured on this podcast. I love a good recommendation, so just comment below or DM me on LinkedIn with your recommended reading so that I can deliver the content that you want to listen to. Thank you, and now into today's episode. This month we're going to dive into one of the books that I tend to recommend quite regularly actually to my clients. And it's a book called How Women Rise by Sally Helgesen and Marshall Goldsmith. And inside this book, Sally and Marshall identify common habits or behaviours that are very typical in the workplace, particularly unfortunately in the female population, which can get in the way of your future success. And in the book they describe them, they give you examples and tell you how to overcome them. And to be honest with you, the reason I recommend it is I wished I'd had this book earlier in my career, because there's quite a few of the behaviours that I can identify with, and maybe if I'd have known about them earlier I might have been able to do something about them to change the trajectory of my career. And one of the things I also love about this book is that it is filled with real stories. So you get to read about people who have these behaviours and the impact that it was having on their careers when actually they didn't even necessarily realise it at the time. There's some hard truths in the book, so really making you self-reflect. And importantly, there are some practical steps that you can take to change the situation for yourself, right? And this isn't about changing who you are. It's just about changing some of the habits and behaviours that you have that might be getting in the way of your career. And as I said earlier, you might not even realise it. But what happens in this book is it raises your level of awareness to some of the behaviours you have and starts getting you question as to whether or not they're serving you in your career. I mentioned that the book is pitched at behaviours that were more typically observed in the female population. But I have to say they're not unique to our gender. Right? I've personally coached and mentored several male professionals who exhibit many of these behaviours as well. So don't let the title fool you. But what was observed in the research for the book is that a lot of these are predominantly noticed within the female population. So if you're feeling that your career's a bit stuck, that maybe your contributions aren't recognised, or you feel that you get overlooked for promotion and opportunity, then instead of looking outwards, start looking inwards to see if there's anything that you could be doing to change that situation. Okay, there's 12 habits in total that are identified in the book, and they are, I'm going to list them out here. The first is the reluctance to claim your achievements. The second is expecting others to notice and reward you. The third is overvaluing your expertise. The fourth, not leveraging relationships. The fifth is failing to enlist allies from day one. The sixth is putting your job before your career. The seventh is the perfection trap. The eighth, disease to please. Ninth is minimizing. 10th is being too much. 11 is ruminating. And 12 is letting your radar distract you. Okay, and so when I read through those, you probably recognised some of them and instantly related to them. Some of them you may be even wondering why they would be considered a problem, and we'll dig into that over the course of this podcast episode. And others, you may be wondering, what on earth do they mean? And I'm going to help you to understand that. Now, one of the things I noticed when reading the book was that I feel like the habits can be grouped into 4 basic themes, which I know you'll recognise. The first one is visibility, the second is relationships, the third is job before career, and the fourth is mindset. So what I'm going to do over the next 4 episodes of this podcast is to focus in on each of those categories and how they were inspired by How Women to Rise and what we can learn from the book on each of those. So if during this podcast you are inspired by the book and you decide that you would like to buy it and delve deeper into some of what we talk about in these podcasts, there is a link in the show notes. Please note that this is an affiliate link, and I do ask that if you really enjoy listening to my Career Book Club and find it useful, then I would ask you to think about using the link to help fund the continuation of this club. Okay, that being said, let's dive into today's episode. If you've ever wondered why doing great work isn't always enough, or why others always seem to get credit that you think you deserve, or get promotions that you think you've been overlooked for, this could be the episode for you. Visibility covers a magnitude of different areas within your career. And what I want to do is pick up on 3 of the habits that were highlighted in the book that I think are really important. There was habit number 1, the reluctance to claim your achievements. Habit number 2, expecting others to notice and reward you. And habit number 9, which was minimizing. And one of the things that Sally challenges in the book is the fundamental belief that many of us have that if we do excellent work, it will automatically lead to recognition and advancement. Okay, she calls it the success delusion. This belief that if you just work harder and you produce better results and demonstrate how competent you are, you'll naturally get noticed and promoted. And that really doesn't work. And I'm going to show you some examples of how that way of thinking can get in your way. And in most work environments, visibility isn't automatic. It needs to be intentional. And you're going to learn today why that's so important and why it's your responsibility to ensure that you have the right visibility with the right people, which is really, really important. And this becomes even more noticeable the further up the career ladder you climb. So in your early days, when you're maybe new, the people around you are the people that you need to be visible to. They're the ones that are making decisions about your career. They're the ones that are deciding whether or not you get the pay rise. They're the ones that decide whether to put you forward for promotion or other job opportunities, career opportunities. But what happens the further up the career ladder you go, the people who are having these conversations starts to become wider and are people who will not necessarily know you directly, will not deal with you on a day-to-day basis. And so if your manager's in a room full of 5 other managers and they all want someone in their team to get that one single promotion that's available, then each of those managers will be advocating for their own employee. So you could have your manager advocating for you. But if the other 5 managers in that room have very little knowledge of you, then they can't help back up your case, the case that your manager's putting for you. Whereas if in that room There are other managers who are also aware of you, who also know your capabilities, who also would like to see you succeed, who also believe that you're the right person for the job. Then they'll back up the case that he's putting forward, the proposal he's putting forward, or the proposal that you're putting forward, because there comes a point in the career ladder when instead of your manager advocating for you to get that promotion slot, you start having to advocate for yourself to get that promotion slot in front of all these managers. So it really is in your best interest to make sure that they all know who you are, that they know what you're capable of, that they know what you want. And that doesn't just apply for promotions, it's the same for pay rises, where you rank relative to your peers. That same group of people are making those decisions. And if they don't know you, then you're at a disadvantage. So I want you to think about that while we go through today's episode. And think about how, if you are displaying any of these behaviours, these habits, what you need to do to change that. What impacts it having in your career, and what would you like to do to change it? Now, I'm going to start with the more obvious one. In my mind, it's the more obvious one, and that's the habit of minimising, habit number 9. When you think of the word minimising, you might think of your physicality, the space that you take up, your body language, which is definitely one part of it, but not the only part, as we'll discuss in a moment. But let's stick with body language first. And what the book identified was that women tend to have a lot of minimising behaviours. And so what you find is in a room, the women are not taking up as much space in the room. Physicality, so not just a physical size and shape, but also their personality. And so I want you to think about when you're in a room of your peers or senior leaders or whoever around the table, are you taking up your full space in that room, or are you shrinking to the back to make space for other people? Are you making yourself smaller by collapsing yourself in, hands between your knees, shoulders hunched, body tight, head down, taking up less space? As if you have less right to be at the table, because that's what it looks like. You want to have a presence. You want to be visible in the room, not forgotten. You don't want to be that wee shy woman that was sitting in the corner. You want people in that room to know that you were there. That, yeah, Julie, I saw you and I heard you, which we'll come on to in a minute, but I saw you take up space in that room. I saw you participating in the room. I saw you engaging with people in the room. I felt your energy. I felt your positivity. Think about how you want people to feel when in your company. And are you bringing that to the table in larger rooms? A lot of people find it a lot easier to do this when there's just a one-on-one. You want to bring that same energy, that same visibility, that same physical presence into every situation. You want to be more visible. Think about your body language. I'm sure you've read lots on body language before. Shoulders back, head up high, grabbing the attention of people in the room, eye contact, smiling. Spread yourself out a little bit on the table if that's necessary. Make your presence felt. Engage with people. Smile at people. Nod in agreement when they say things. Ask them questions. Be physically visible. Make sure people are aware that you're in the room and that you are actively participating. So that moves us on nicely to the second part of minimising, is the language. So do you use minimising language when you speak? So that's things like saying, oh, just, sorry. Like, I just wanted to check in. Or, one that really, really hates, sorry if this is a stupid question. Or another one that you hear quite a lot is, I might be wrong, but... That's making yourself small in terms of language. That's minimising your impact. You sound unsure of yourself. And as soon as you sound unsure of yourself, other people will feel unsure about you and what you're about to say. Because you lack confidence in it, so why should they have confidence in it? Okay, these aren't polite phrases. They are what they call in the book visibility killers. I love that phrase. Visibility killers. I'm going to start using it. They signal doubt. They dilute the impact of what you're going to say. Okay, and they can make even the most competent professional sound uncertain or junior or lacking in confidence. You don't want to be using minimizing language either. And in actual fact, I have a PDF. It's in the show notes for this podcast. Go and download it. In there, there's lots of examples of the type of language that minimizes your impact, the type of language that kills your visibility, the type of language that you want to just eliminate from your vocabulary. And it gives you examples of how that changes the way you're perceived if you use different types of language. So please go download that if you are relating to this part of the conversation. Okay, so before we move on to the next habit, just to remind ourselves, 3 things that you want to do. You want to own the room physically. Sit tall, make eye contact, take up space, have a great posture. Having a strong posture affects how others see you and how you see yourself. There's interesting research that's taken place that demonstrates that if you have a confident posture, if you use confident body language, no matter how you feel inside, just use the confident body language. And what happens is it starts to influence how you feel. And you actually start to feel more confident just by the very act of changing your physicality. And there is a great TED Talk by a woman called Amy Cuddy. It's all about the power pose. If you haven't seen it before, go and take a look. YouTube, Amy Cuddy, TED Talk, power pose. It is very insightful into how we can actually teach ourselves to be more confident just through the use of our body. And if you have seen it before, but you haven't applied what you learned, go and take another look, okay? I always say, if you ever learn something new, go and apply it. Don't just read about it, just don't watch a YouTube video about it. Go and apply it. And that same applies for this podcast. What I'm telling you today, go out and try it. So own the room physically. The second thing is audit your language. And when I talk about language, I'm not just talking about verbal language. I'm also talking about your email language. Have a look at some of your emails when you're writing them. Are you using words like just, hopefully, I'm no expert, sorry to interrupt? Are you using those? Again, replace them with clarity and confidence. Download the workbook. It will give you some examples of what to cut out and what to use instead. I actually had an interesting conversation with a client this week where she had actually shared with me an email that she was going to send her boss. And it was a well-constructed email. It was really well laid out, very direct, very to the point, which was fantastic. The thing that needed to be improved was the use of some of the language she was using. She was using visibility killers. She was using weak language. And it was just a couple of wee words and phrases, but immediately when you took them out of the email, it then was a lot more impactful. So don't just audit your verbal language, audit your written language as well. And then the other thing to think about in terms of language is a thing called assertive framing. And that's, instead of using things like, I could be wrong, what you say instead is, based on my experience, here's what I recommend. Okay? That is not arrogance, it's authority. Okay, so I think that's enough on minimising. Now, the goal is not to dominate conversations. The goal is not to be more pushy. It's not to change who you are. It's about fully showing up. And minimising doesn't protect you. You might think it does, but it doesn't. It erases you from the conversation and really impacts on your visibility. And one of the things to remember is that You can still be kind, warm and collaborative and still speak with strength and authority, right? They're not opposites. There seems to be this perception that somehow being more assertive and being more confident and being more authoritative, is that a word? Authoritative? Means that you can't be a nice person. That is not true. They are not opposites. In fact, if you use them together, they are extremely powerful. And it's one of the things, for my female listeners out there, it's one of the things that women tend to be really good at, is the kind, warm and collaborative. And our male colleagues seem to be better at the strength and authoritative and confident. If you can find your confidence, find your courage, find your authoritative voice, combined with your kindness and your warmth and your collaboration, you are a powerful force to be reckoned with. Okay, so enough on minimising. I want to move on to another habit that was in the book that I really, really resonated with. And I learned this one very, very early in my career, and that is habit 2, which is expecting others to notice your work and reward you. There was an interesting observation in the book that identified that very often women excel at the technical aspects of their jobs, but can sometimes struggle with the political and social dimensions that are required to make their contributions more visible. And so it's a little bit of a paradox. So the very things that make you an excellent worker, attention to detail, perfectionism, focusing on tasks, getting really good at what you do, can actually hinder your advancement if they overshadow the other aspects of creating your career, which is building relationships and self-promotion. And so today we're talking about that self-promotion as part of visibility, is a little bit about self-promotion. I'll talk about that in a moment. In terms of relationship building, I'm going to talk about that in the next episode of this podcast. We'll go more deeply into that. For now, we're going to stick to looking at visibility and self-promotion. And so one of the things that was observed about visibility in terms of the research was this expectation that you will naturally be noticed if you're really, really good at what you do. And then that will naturally lead to reward. And I have to say, as I mentioned earlier, I made this mistake very early in my career. And it was a huge wake-up call. I worked really, really, really hard trying to establish myself as someone of value because I wanted to move into the engineering team. And I kind of figured that my manager and everyone else would know that because I was a qualified engineer working in a role that I was overqualified for. And my expectation was that was okay. I'd got myself in the front door and all I needed to do was work really, really hard, improve my value, and I would automatically get a move into the engineering team. And it wasn't until I got frustrated, disappointed and despondent after a couple of years of waiting that I decided to do something about it. And in my case, I started looking externally. It didn't occur to me to look internally. I hadn't actually understood that I could look internally for opportunities. I was looking externally for opportunities. And so when I told my manager I was leaving because I was going to work for someone else, and I explained why I was leaving, he was flabbergasted. He didn't know I was unhappy. He didn't know I wanted to move into engineering. And I was kind of surprised that he didn't know. How could he not know? I told him I was qualified in engineering. I hadn't spelt it out explicitly. And, interestingly enough, that's when I learned that he didn't want to lose me. He valued me as a valuable member of the team. He wanted to actually give me, I was on contract at the time, and he wanted to actually give me a longer term contract because he valued me. I was the one that kept being chosen for new opportunities within his environment. But that wasn't what I wanted. I wanted new opportunities outside his environment. Well, why would he help me to do that? Unless I explicitly told him that that's what I wanted to do. So I made that mistake. Working really, really hard is not a career strategy. Working really, really hard actually and doing very well at your current job is a really good strategy for keeping you stuck where you are. Why would your manager make it harder for himself to let you go and have to find someone to replace you if he really, really values what you do for him or her? So think about that. Working really, really hard is a great strategy for keeping yourself stuck. And there was another interesting example in the book about a woman called Ellen, who was a software engineer, who again was great at what she did. And in actual fact, she prided herself on her ability to network and create connections between people and resources, or people and other people. She started to become a little bit of a go-to person. And what really surprised Ellen was when she went for a performance review with her boss, and he told her she needed to have more of a presence and get better known within the wider organisation. She was stunned, because that's what she had been doing. It's what she thought she was best at. And after reflection, what she realised was that, yes, she was really good at doing it, but she wasn't very good at telling people she was doing it. She hadn't been telling her boss. She hadn't been making her efforts visible to the people that matter. The person that mattered in this situation was her boss. If he didn't know what she was doing, she was invisible to him. Okay, so think about that. She just assumed her boss would know. You need to ensure that your boss and anybody else who needs to know, the people that are the decision makers, who will decide your fate, who will decide whether you get that pay rise, who will decide whether you get the promotion, who decide whether they're going to open the door to opportunities for you. These people need to know what you're doing. Okay? So the fix to that is very simple. Start talking to people about what you're doing. Let people know what it is you want. Let people know how they can help you. So the lesson here is to make it a habit to have regular reviews with the people who are important. Let's start with your boss. If your boss doesn't already have a regular review in your diary every month, then make it a habit. You put the review in the diary every month. You let your boss know that that's what you want, that that's what you need, or even at the minimum quarterly. You should never ever leave it to your annual performance review to find out that you and your boss aren't in sync. And the only way you can ensure that you and your boss are in sync is to be having regular conversations. Okay? Now, one of the things Ellen did, which I thought was quite interesting, was she actually started emailing her boss every week. At the end of the week, she would send them an email with a summary of what she'd been doing. Now, it felt a little bit awkward. Her boss didn't often respond to it. Occasionally he did. And when he did, it was a bit of positive feedback or a bit of encouragement that helped her to continue and sustain the momentum. And she had a very different performance review the next time. Okay, so the lesson here is when you assume people know what you do, you stay stuck. When you tell them, you start to open doors. Okay, raise your visibility. Talk to people about what you're doing. Now this leads quite nicely on to the third habit I want to talk about today. It was actually habit number 1 in the book, and it's called the reluctance to claim your achievements. Many of us, and unfortunately again it's more prevalent in the female population, and I'm not entirely sure why, it's the way we're brought up, I guess. But we often get this sense or are taught about being humble, to not brag, to let your work speak for itself, which we just mentioned is a really bad strategy, okay? This being modest, as if being modest is a valuable personality trait. But in the workplace, that modesty can really cost you, like big time. And there's a brilliant story in the book that I really loved, that I thought really captured it, all about this dynamic between two people, Amy from one organisation and Mitch from another organisation. So both worked for different companies. They were third sector companies. It was charitable organisations, I think it was, if I remember rightly. And they'd been brought together to collaborate on this big event. The two of them worked really well together. They produced this amazing event. It went really, really well. Everybody was happy, and it got a lot of great publicity. And then after the event, they were both interviewed by the local press. Now, they were interviewed separately. And when the article came out in the press, Amy was furious. She was livid because the article focused all on Mitch and his organisation. And there was very little mention of her and her organisation. What had actually happened was, during the interview, Amy did what Amy always did. She heaped the praise on everybody else. She talked about how wonderful Mitch was and the rest of the team and what a great job they all did. She really laid it on thick, giving lots of praise to Mitch and the rest of the team. Mitch, on the other hand, thought it was his responsibility to ensure that his contribution and his organisation received good publicity. This was a great opportunity. The press were involved. This was an opportunity for him to do what he's paid to do, get some publicity for his organisation. He fully expected Amy to do the same. Amy expected him to big her up, to advocate for her. And Amy's reaction is really insightful because she takes this moral high ground as if somehow she's the better person and that Mitch is just this self-centred individual that doesn't care about anybody else but himself. That was her interpretation of what happened. And then through various different situations and conversations, she realised that that might not be the case. And particularly what really landed with her was when she got the feedback from the board of her organisation, who were really disappointed in her because she didn't use the opportunity to get press attention for their organisation. So they saw her as being failing in her role. One of the things was to bring attention to her organisation and get publicity, and she'd failed to do that. So she was forced to actually reevaluate her reaction, and she did actually speak to some people about it. And what she realised was she has this habit of always shifting the spotlight onto other people rather than ensuring that her efforts and contributions are also highlighted. Now, this is really common with a lot of women I talk to. Again, it's not unique to women, but unfortunately women do tend to do it a bit more than our male colleagues. And I hear a lot when I'm out working in workshops and stuff like that. And people, women in particular, will admit to me that if they're asked for feedback, they will gladly give feedback about the other people that were involved in a project and talk with great enthusiasm about what they did. But when it comes to themselves, they talk with modesty. In fact, it's funny, I want you to think about this and think about if you do it. If someone comes up to you and says, "Oh, great job. Amy, you did a fantastic job there." Do you say, "Oh, thanks so much. I'm really proud of how that turned out"? Or do you say, "Oh, it was nothing really. Do you know, Julie was so much help on that project"? Or, "Oh, do you know, if I'd had a bit more time, I could have done this." Or, "I really wasn't happy how this turned out"? Do you either dismiss the praise, deflect the praise, or downplay actually how good your work was? Okay. It's a terrible thing to do. You need to learn to start advocating for yourself. You need to learn to talk positively about your contributions. You need to learn to accept praise. Now, I'm not suggesting you start showboating and making every conversation all about you. But what I am talking about is you owning your value and not being afraid to advocate for yourself. So again, there's 3 very simple shifts that you can make. If you recognise yourself in what I've just described there's 3 things that you can do. First of all, start tracking weekly what your wins are. Write them down. That's the very first step, is for you to acknowledge your achievements. You know, it's interesting, a client I worked with struggles with this, and we're working through it at the moment, because she doesn't acknowledge her achievements. She just thinks it's just part of the job. It's just what I do. This is the kind of phrases that she uses. When in actual fact, other people are looking at it and going, oh wow, that was amazing what you just did there. And she shrugs it off. So we're working on that. I encourage you to work on it as well. Start tracking your weekly wins. I challenged her, and I'll challenge you. Every Friday, I want you to write down a minimum of 1 achievement that you're proud of, or 1 piece of feedback that you're proud of, every single week. If you can't find something every single week, then you're missing out on understanding what you do, and you're missing out on opportunities to advocate for yourself. Okay, the second thing is the whole compliments thing. If someone compliments at your work, do not be modest, do not deflect, do not defer, do not refer to anybody else, just say thank you. If you can't advocate for yourself at this point in time, just say thank you and leave it at that. Do you know, by deflecting, deferring, or being modest, or pointing out your mistakes, it's almost like you're being a little bit rude to the other person. No, they've taken the time to compliment you, and what are you doing? You're rejecting the compliment. And in actual fact, if you start going on and on and on about all the different things that could have gone better, they might wonder why they even bothered to give you the compliment in the first place, because they don't want to hear you complaining about all the things that could have been better. So next time, just say thank you. And then as you grow comfortable saying thank you, and you grow comfortable acknowledging your achievements, start building on that process of accepting praise. So instead of just saying thank you, you could try something like, oh thanks, I'm really pleased at how that went. Or thanks, I really liked the way I was able to, and highlighting an achievement. And by doing it that way, you're doing it in a very natural, conversational, non-braggy way. Because one of the reasons why you don't advocate for yourself is many women, for some reason, think that is bragging. It is not bragging. It is letting other people know what you've done so that they have the information and the awareness about you so they can help you in your career. Remember, you can't rise in your career if no one knows what you're doing. So you really need to begin the process of learning to be comfortable advocating for yourself. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up today's episode, which is all about visibility. And visibility is not about self-promotion for ego's sake. It's about making sure your value is known so your voice can shape what happens next. It's about making sure that the people who will make decisions about your career know you, know what you're capable of, and know what you want. Okay, it should be an integral part of any career strategy. If you're not setting aside time on a regular basis to improve your visibility with the people who matter in your organisation, in your industry, then you are really keeping yourself invisible. Creating visibility should be an integral part of your career strategy. You should be doing it on a regular basis, ensuring that you're visible to the people who make the decisions about your career, about your next pay rise, about your future promotions, about opening doors for you on where you want your career to go. So, your key takeaways from today. 1. Stop minimising. Cut the language that shrinks your presence. You're not just checking in or probably wrong. You're capable, informed, and worth hearing. Own the room physically. You've earned the right to be there. You need to believe it and demonstrate it. And audit your language. You want to sound confident. You want to speak with authority. Okay, and as I mentioned, there's a download in the show notes for this podcast episode all about strong language, which will give you lots of examples. Okay? The second thing was don't expect to be noticed. You need to make yourself visible. Say what you do, why it matters, and what you want next. Start to practice ensuring people are aware of what you do. Regularly update your boss. Regularly update people that matter. Make it a part of your career strategy. And finally, own your achievements. Be willing to brag. And if you don't like the word brag, it's be willing to advocate for yourself. Okay? Ensure that your achievements and your successes are visible. If they're not, you will stay stuck. And if it feels uncomfortable at first, start small and build. I gave you a couple of examples about writing down your wins, accepting compliments. That's 3 very simple shifts that you can make instantly. You can start today. Okay? The key is to be comfortable being visible. And as I mentioned before, visibility doesn't mean being someone you're not. It means letting people see who you are, how amazing you are, and what you have accomplished. Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Career Book Club. If today's episode resonated with you, please share it with a friend or a colleague who you think needs to hear it. In the next episode, I'm going to share more insights from the book How Women Rise on the subject of building the relationships you need to succeed in your career. Make sure you don't miss it by subscribing to this podcast to follow me for more real strategies to create a career you love. And remember, if you have a book recommendation that you'd like to be featured on this podcast, please get in touch. My details will be in the show notes. Bye for now.